In episode 1, we watched a dynasty born from nothing and the men who made it happen: Babur, Humayun, and Akbar. By the death of Akbar the Great in 1605, the Mughal Empire controlled a quarter of the world's wealth. But power at that scale always comes with one question: what happens to the men who inherit it? This is the story of 3 emperors who inherited that golden age and what they did with it. 1 century, 1 throne, and the seeds of destruction. This is episode 2 of Echoes of History's Mughal Empire series. In 1569, Akbar's queen gave birth to a son. He was named Selim. Akbar gave this boy everything: the finest education, military training, the full machinery of imperial grooming. But Selim developed something Akbar never intended: a taste for wine and opium that would haunt his entire life. As Akbar aged, the relationship between father and son curdled into rivalry. In 1600, Selim did something astonishing. He declared himself an independent ruler from Allahabad and openly rebelled against his own father, against the man who had given him everything. A reconciliation was eventually brokered by Selim's mother, Mariam-uz-Zamani, who brought the 2 men back together. When Akbar died in 1605, Selim took the throne. He gave himself a new name: Jahangir, conqueror of the world. Almost immediately, history delivered its verdict on that title. His own son, Prince Khusro, rebelled against him. Jahangir had rebelled against his father and been forgiven. He did not extend the same mercy to his son. Khusro was captured. His supporters were impaled on stakes along the road. Khusro himself was forced to ride through this corridor of death to see what had become of his friends, and then Jahangir ordered him blinded. The emperor who hung a chain of justice for the poor had no justice to spare for his own blood. That contradiction is Jahangir in miniature. During Khusro's rebellion, an event occurred that would echo for centuries. The 5th guru of the Sikh faith, Guru Arjan Dev, gave shelter and some financial support to the fleeing prince. Jahangir interpreted this as treason. Guru Arjan Dev was arrested, taken to Lahore, and subjected to such severe treatment that he died in custody in 1606. For the Sikh community, this was a defining wound. Guru Arjan Dev's son, Guru Har Gobind, responded by taking up 2 swords, one representing spiritual authority, one representing temporal power. The message was clear: spiritual life was no longer sufficient. The Sikh community would now also defend itself. In the decades and centuries that followed, this shift in identity, from peaceful community to armed brotherhood, would have enormous consequences for the Mughal Empire. The seed planted by Jahangir's cruelty would eventually grow into a force that helped bring the dynasty down. When Jahangir took the throne, he made a remarkable gesture. He had a chain of pure gold hung between the walls of Agra Fort and the riverbank below, 60 bells attached along its length. His decree: anyone, at any hour, of any rank, farmer, widow, beggar, could pull that chain, ring those bells, and demand an audience with the emperor himself. It was called the Chain of Justice, and it worked. There is an account of an old woman who rang the chain one morning. Her crops had been destroyed, trampled under the hooves of the royal cavalry passing through her land. Jahangir heard her case himself.
He ruled in her favor immediately. Compensation was paid from the imperial treasury, and a new order was issued. Royal processions must henceforth avoid farmers' fields. The man who blinded his son was also the man who stopped everything to hear an old woman's complaint about her crops. This is the impossible complexity of Mughal rule.
Jahangir also carried a deep passion for painting. He elevated Mughal miniature art to its absolute peak, bringing an almost scientific precision to the depiction of animals, birds, and human portraiture. The paintings produced in his court now hang in the Louvre, the V&A, and the Met, and last year a single Mughal miniature from this era sold at Christie's London for over $13 million, setting a world record for classical Indian art.
In 1611, a woman entered Jahangir's life and never left it. Her name was Mehrunisa. She was the daughter of a Persian nobleman who had come to Akbar's court. She had been married before. Her first husband died in a rebellion, and she was a widow when Jahangir first noticed her. Jahangir was captivated. He married her, gave her the title Nur Jahan, Light of the World, and then, over the following years, he handed her the empire. By this point, Jahangir's addictions had reached alarming levels. He was consuming, by his own admission in his memoirs, 20 cups of wine daily, often laced with opium. At that level of consumption, coherent governance was simply not possible. Nur Jahan filled the vacuum. She is the only Mughal empress to have coins struck in her name. Imperial decrees required her seal alongside the emperor's. She conducted diplomatic meetings, made military decisions, and managed court appointments. She was, by any functional measure, the ruler of the Mughal Empire for the better part of 2 decades. She used that power shrewdly, appointing her brother Asaf Khan as Grand Vizier and arranging for his daughter to marry the future Shah Jahan. That daughter would one day be known as Mumtaz Mahal, the woman for whom the Taj Mahal was built. Nur Jahan had, in effect, installed the next emperor's future wife, ensuring her family's grip on power stretched into the next generation. But when Shah Jahan rose to power, the balance shifted. A conflict developed between Nur Jahan and the prince she had once helped position. She tried to back a different succession candidate. She lost. In 1615, a man arrived at Jahangir's court who deserves far more attention than he usually receives. His name was Sir Thomas Roe, ambassador of King James I of England. His request was modest, a trade agreement, permission for English merchants to operate in India. Jahangir agreed. India was the world's greatest marketplace. Why not let a few more traders in? He could not have imagined what he was really agreeing to. The men Jahangir welcomed as merchants were the advance guard of the British East India Company, an institution that would, within a century and a half, dismantle the very empire Jahangir sat atop. His descendants would be jailed, exiled, executed. The last Mughal emperor would die in a prison cell in Burma. Jahangir opened the door with a handshake. His great-great-grandchildren paid the price. History rarely announces its turning points while they are happening. Jahangir loved Kashmir with the devotion of a man who has found the only place where his demons quiet down. Every year he traveled there, the cool air, the clear lakes, the gardens.
In 1627, returning from Kashmir, he fell gravely ill on the road near Rawalpindi. He could go no further. He died there, in a roadside camp with Nur Jahan beside him. Historical tradition says he died with his head in her lap. He was buried in Lahore in a magnificent tomb that Nur Jahan designed and supervised herself. She outlived him by 18 years. She spent them in Lahore, quietly, away from court politics. The woman who had once been the most powerful person in Asia, now entirely forgotten. She built her own tomb beside his. Even in death, she refused to be separated from him.
The man Nur Jahan had tried to prevent from taking the throne took it anyway. Prince Khurram, Shah Jahan, ascended in 1628. And he did what Mughal emperors always did in those first brutal days of a new reign. He had his male relatives killed. Brothers, nephews, cousins, anyone who might one day look at the throne and decide they deserved it more. This was not an aberration, it was policy. The Mughals called it, without irony, throne or coffin. There was no middle ground, no retirement plan, no comfortable exile. Power was total, or it was nothing. The man history knows as the great romantic, the emperor of love, began his reign wading through the blood of his own family. That's the story they don't put on the postcards. Shah Jahan had multiple wives, as was standard for Mughal emperors. But one woman was different from all the others. Her name was Arjumand Banu Begum. Shah Jahan first saw her in a marketplace bazaar when she was 15. He was 19. He fell immediately and completely. They married in 1612. But Mumtaz Mahal, the name he gave her, meaning exalted one of the palace, was the one who mattered. She was not merely a beloved wife. She was his political counselor, his diplomatic advisor, the woman whose judgment he trusted above all others. She traveled with him on military campaigns. This was the 17th century, and she accompanied her husband to war. 19 years of marriage, 14 children. Think about that number for a moment. 14 pregnancies in 19 years, roughly one every 16 months. Whatever the romance of their story, Mumtaz Mahal's life was also one of extraordinary physical endurance. In 1631, on campaign in Burhanpur, she went into labor with her 14th child. The baby was delivered safely. Mumtaz Mahal was not. She died in childbirth, aged 37. Historical accounts say that on her deathbed, she made 4 requests. Build her a tomb worthy of their love, marry no one else, care for their children, and visit her grave each year. Shah Jahan honored 3 of those promises. Contemporary accounts record that Shah Jahan's hair turned white overnight. He locked himself in his chambers for 8 days. When he finally emerged, he was visibly aged, stooped, drawn, diminished. He had lost the one person who made the empire feel worth ruling. What Shah Jahan did next is the reason we still know his name. He decided to build Mumtaz Mahal a tomb. Not just any tomb, the most extraordinary structure the world had ever seen. 20,000 workers, 22 years of construction, materials sourced from more than 20 countries, white marble from Rajasthan, precious stones from Persia, Afghanistan, Russia, and Tibet. The Taj Mahal cost the equivalent in today's money of billions of dollars. Some historians estimate the modern replacement cost at over $1 billion. But the numbers miss the point. The Taj Mahal is not a monument to wealth. It is a monument to the specific weight of loss, the way grief can become the most creative force in human life. Shah Jahan was trying to build something that would outlast time itself, something that could contain the enormity of what he had lost. There is a story, debated by historians, that Shah Jahan intended to build a second tomb for himself on the opposite bank of the Yamuna River, a black marble mirror image of the Taj connected by a bridge. The two tombs facing each other across the water, through eternity. It never happened. His son had other plans for him. Today, the Taj Mahal receives 8 million visitors a year. It is arguably the most recognized building in human history. And it exists because a man lost his wife and could not bear the silence. Shah Jahan's reign was, by almost any material measure, the zenith of Mughal power. He founded a new capital, Shah Jahanabad, the walled city of Old Delhi, whose Red Fort and Jama Masjid still define the Delhi skyline today. His throne, the legendary Peacock Throne, took 7 years to construct. It was encrusted with gemstones, including the Koh-i-Noor diamond, the very same stone that now sits in the British crown jewels. Its estimated value in today's terms exceeds $1 billion for a single throne. But beneath the magnificence, fractures were forming. Shah Jahan launched 3 separate military campaigns to recapture Kandahar from the Persians. He failed all 3 times. It was the first major signal that Mughal military dominance was not limitless. The treasury, already strained by the Taj Mahal and the new capital, took further damage. And then, in 1657, Shah Jahan fell gravely ill. Word spread that the emperor was dying. His 4 sons heard the news and did what Mughal princes always did. They reached for the throne. 4 princes, 1 throne, no rules. Dara Shikoh, Shah Shuja, Murad Bakhsh, and Aurangzeb. But this wasn't merely a war between 4 brothers. It was a clash between 2 entirely different visions of what India should be. On one side, Dara Shikoh, Shah Jahan's eldest son and chosen heir. He was a scholar in the tradition of Akbar, a man who believed that Islam, Hinduism, and all the great traditions of the subcontinent were expressions of the same fundamental truth. He translated the Upanishads into Persian. He sat with mystics and philosophers. He was the empire's intellectual crown prince. He was also a poor general. On the other side, Aurangzeb, 3rd son, brilliant military mind, deeply orthodox in his faith, and patient as stone. Historians still ask the question, if Dara Shikoh had won, what would India have become? Would the religious conflicts that defined the next 3 centuries have been avoided? Would the Mughal Empire have survived for another 100 years? History doesn't deal in what-ifs. It deals in what happened. And what happened was this: Aurangzeb was smarter. Aurangzeb's path to power is one of the most coldly brilliant political maneuvers in the history of any dynasty anywhere in the world. He formed alliances with two of his brothers, Shah Shuja and Murad, convincing them that together they would defeat Dara and then divide the empire. Both brothers believed him. In 1658, at the Battle of Samogar, Dara Shikoh's army faced Aurangzeb's forces. Dara made a catastrophic mistake. He dismounted from his elephant in the heat of battle. His soldiers, thinking he had fled or been killed, broke and ran. Dara fled north, then south, then east, a hunted man with a crumbling army and a price on his head. He was eventually captured, betrayed by a man he had trusted. He was paraded through the streets of Delhi on a small, dirty elephant, dressed in rags, so the people could see what had become of their beloved prince. Then he was killed. But first, Aurangzeb wanted Shah Jahan to know. Dara's head was severed and placed on a silver platter. It was carried to Agra Fort, to the room where the old emperor sat imprisoned, the man who had loved Dara above all his children. Shah Jahan looked at what was on that platter. He recognized his son. Historical accounts say he stopped eating after that day. There are defeats that break a man's body, and there are moments that break something deeper. That was Shah Jahan's moment. Now, for Aurangzeb's allies, the brothers who had helped him. Murad was arrested on an old murder charge, conveniently remembered now that he was no longer useful. He was executed. Shah Shuja fled to Bengal, then to Burma, where he disappeared into the jungle and was never seen again. His fate is unknown to this day. Within 2 years, Aurangzeb had eliminated all 3 of his brothers and placed himself alone on the throne. He gave himself a title, Alamgir, Conqueror of the World, the same title Jahangir had chosen. Neither man found that the world stayed conquered for long. Aurangzeb imprisoned his father in Agra Fort. This was Akbar's fort, rebuilt and glorified by Shah Jahan with white marble palaces. He had lived in it, ruled from it, made it his own. And now he was its prisoner. 8 years. Shah Jahan wrote letters to his son, sometimes pleading, sometimes angry, sometimes simply asking for contact. Aurangzeb's replies, when he bothered to send them, were cool and bureaucratic, the formalities of a functionary, not the words of a son. Shah Jahan had one consolation. His room had a small window facing south. Through that window, across the Yamuna River, he could see the white dome of the Taj Mahal, the tomb he had built for the woman he loved. When his eyes began failing, he reportedly had a large diamond brought to him. He used it as a lens, holding it up to catch the light and project a tiny image of the Taj Mahal onto his palm. He died in 1666, still in captivity. His daughter Jahanara, who had refused to abandon him, who had chosen to share his imprisonment rather than enjoy freedom at court, prepared his body for burial. He was laid beside Mumtaz Mahal in the Taj Mahal. After everything, the glory, the imprisonment, the betrayal, he ended up exactly where he had always meant to be. But here is the detail the romance always leaves out. Mumtaz Mahal had asked him for one promise above all others, never remarry. He broke it. Within months of her death, he took another wife. The man who built the greatest monument to love in human history could not keep the one promise the woman he loved had asked for most. Some say that counts as a happy ending. Others would disagree. Here's a fact about Aurangzeb that is worth sitting with for a moment. He was one of the wealthiest men who ever lived, ruler of an empire producing a quarter of the world's GDP. And he supplemented his personal income by sewing prayer caps and hand-copying the Quran, which he sold in the marketplace. He didn't need the money. He refused, on principle, to use the imperial treasury for personal expenses. This is the man who ordered the blinding of enemies, imprisoned his own father, killed 3 brothers, and jailed his favorite daughter. Aurangzeb is perhaps the most written about figure in Indian history and the least agreed upon. In Pakistan, he is often celebrated as a pious Muslim ruler who purified a court that had grown decadent. In India, he is frequently vilified as a religious bigot who undid Akbar's legacy of inclusion. The truth, as it usually is considerably more complicated than either verdict. Let's try to understand him properly.
Aurangzeb banned music from his court. He prohibited alcohol. He dismissed the dancers and musicians who had defined Mughal court life for a century. He was, by every account, genuinely devout, not as performance, but as practice. He spent hours each day in prayer. He fasted regularly. He memorized the Quran. He lived simply, in a court where extravagance had been the norm for generations.
His first and most beloved wife was Dilraz Banu Begum, a Safavid princess from Persia, and by all accounts, his true companion. They married in 1637. She bore him 5 children. She died in 1657 in childbirth with their 5th child, just 1 year before Aurangzeb took the throne. He never replaced her. No empress ever sat in her place after she was gone. In her memory, he had a tomb built in Aurangabad, the Bibi Ka Maqbara, the tomb of the lady. It is modeled on the Taj Mahal. Shah Jahan built the Taj for his wife. Aurangzeb built one for his. History remembered one as the Emperor of Love. The other, it largely remembered as a hard and uncompromising ruler. Perhaps that says more about how history chooses to remember people than about the people themselves.
Aurangzeb reimposed the jizya, the tax on non-Muslims that Akbar had abolished over a century earlier. It was a direct reversal of everything Akbar had built. Rajput nobles, who had served as the empire's most loyal generals for generations, felt the shift. Communities that had been stakeholders in the empire began to feel like subjects of it. The resentment was quiet at first, and then it wasn't. And here is the irony. One of his own wives was Hindu. The man who reimposed this tax had a Hindu woman in his own household. That contradiction tells you everything about how complicated Aurangzeb really was.
In 1675, Aurangzeb made a decision that would haunt the Mughal Empire for decades. Guru Tegh Bahadur, the ninth guru of the Sikh faith, had been publicly defending the rights of Kashmiri Hindus who were being pressured to convert to Islam. Aurangzeb summoned him to Delhi. According to historical and Sikh tradition, the ultimatum was stark: convert or die. Guru Tegh Bahadur refused. He was executed in Chandni Chowk, the great marketplace of Delhi, in November 1675. The Sikh community was devastated. And then it was transformed. Guru Tegh Bahadur's son, Guru Gobind Singh, founded the Khalsa in 1699, a community of initiated Sikh warriors bound by a code of conduct and sworn to resist injustice. In the decades that followed, the Khalsa became one of the Mughal Empire's most formidable opponents. Mughal governors in the Punjab faced repeated military defeats. Eventually, the Sikh Empire under Maharaja Ranjit Singh would rule the very territories that had been the heart of Mughal power. Aurangzeb's execution of Guru Tegh Bahadur didn't just create a martyr, it created an army. During his reign, Aurangzeb began one of the most ambitious legal projects in the history of any empire, anywhere in the world. He convened 500 Islamic scholars, 300 from the Indian subcontinent, 100 from Iraq, and 100 from Mecca and Medina. He tasked them with producing a complete codification of Islamic law as it applied to governance, commerce, family, war, and justice. The project took 8 years and produced 30 volumes. The result was the Fatawa-e-Alamgiri, still considered one of the most comprehensive compilations of Islamic jurisprudence ever produced. It is still taught in madrasas today. The framework of Muslim personal law in both India and Pakistan draws directly from it. British colonial administrators in the 18th and 19th centuries used it as their primary reference for governing Muslim subjects. The man who sewed prayer caps and sold them in the market also commissioned one of the great legal achievements of the medieval world. That's Aurangzeb. If Aurangzeb had one opponent who defined his limits, it was Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. Shivaji was a military genius who grew up in the Western Ghats of Maharashtra. He developed a style of warfare that the Mughal army simply could not counter: guerrilla tactics. Strike fast, fade into the hills, strike again somewhere else. The Mughal war machine was designed for open field battle. It was almost useless against an enemy who refused to stand still. Aurangzeb sent his best general, his own uncle, Shaista Khan, to deal with Shivaji. Shivaji responded by infiltrating Shaista Khan's own camp at night and attacking him in his bedroom. Shaista Khan escaped by jumping through a window, losing 3 fingers in the process. This was a humiliation, and humiliation in 17th century politics had consequences. Aurangzeb then tried diplomacy, or something wearing diplomacy's clothes. He invited Shivaji to Agra in 1666 for what was presented as a summit. Shivaji arrived. He was placed under house arrest. What happened next has passed into legend. Shivaji claimed illness and began sending large baskets of sweets to be distributed to the poor. The baskets came and went for weeks. The guards became accustomed to them. One day, Shivaji himself was in one of the baskets. He walked out of Agra. Aurangzeb was furious. There was nothing he could do. Shivaji returned to Maharashtra and in 1674 formally established the Maratha Empire. He died in 1680, but the Maratha Confederacy he founded would outlast the Mughal Empire itself. Here is a fact that surprises many people. Under Aurangzeb, the Mughal Empire reached its greatest territorial extent in history. It stretched from Kabul in the northwest to Bengal in the east, from Kashmir in the north to the southern tip of the Deccan. No Mughal empire before or after him ruled more land. And yet, that achievement contained the seeds of collapse. After Shivaji's death, Aurangzeb made the decision that most historians identify as the beginning of the end of the Mughal Empire. He moved his entire court south to the Deccan Plateau, determined to complete the conquest that had eluded every Mughal empire before him. He would stay for 26 years. He would never return to Delhi. The problem was this: the Deccan was not a problem that could be solved by force. The Marathas fought the way water fights, not with a single concentrated strike, but with relentless erosion. They raided supply lines, ambushed convoys, harassed Mughal garrisons, and disappeared into the mountain terrain before any response could be organized. Meanwhile, the Punjab was in turmoil with Sikh resistance. Rajput nobles in the north were alienated. Jat farmers near Agra had risen in rebellion. Aurangzeb was fighting on every front simultaneously, with an army and treasury stretched to the breaking point. The empire Akbar had built through inclusion, by making every community a stakeholder, was now held together only by force. And force, applied endlessly in all directions, breaks the thing it is trying to hold. Aurangzeb was holding the largest empire in Mughal history through sheer will, and through an iron discipline that left no room for sentiment, not for his enemies, not for those who defied his policies, and as it turned out, not even for his own family. Of all Aurangzeb's children, one stands apart. Zeb-un-Nissa, his eldest daughter, born in 1638, was a prodigy. She memorized the entire Quran by the age of 7. Her delighted father celebrated with a public holiday and a reward of 30,000 gold coins. She went on to study philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, Arabic, and Persian. She became one of the finest poets of her era, writing under the pseudonym Makhfi, meaning the Hidden One. Aurangzeb loved her above all his other children. He discussed state affairs with her. He sought her counsel. In 1681, he discovered that she had been corresponding with her rebellious brother, letters that showed sympathy for his cause. He imprisoned her. Zeb-un-Nissa spent the last 20 years of her life in Salimgarh Fort, Delhi. She continued to write poetry in her cell. Her collected works, published posthumously, are still read and studied today. She died in prison in 1702. Her father did not visit her. The man who had once rewarded her childhood with 30,000 gold coins could not bring himself to see her. Whether that reflects coldness or grief, no historical source tells us. Perhaps both. Aurangzeb is not remembered as a builder. Compared to Shah Jahan, who gave the world the Taj Mahal and the Red Fort, he seems almost invisible architecturally. But he was not entirely absent. The Badshahi Mosque in Lahore, one of the largest mosques in the world, capable of holding tens of thousands of worshippers, was built during his reign. It remains one of the defining landmarks of the city today.
Inside the Red Fort in Delhi, he commissioned the Moti Masjid, the Pearl Mosque, a small, exquisite structure in white marble. He paid for it from his own personal income, not the imperial treasury, his own money. And there is one story connected to his building work that is worth telling. When Aurangzeb added large new gateways in front of the Red Fort, Shah Jahan, sitting in his prison room inside, heard about it. He sent his son a message. "You have dressed the fort as a bride and then covered her face with a veil." Even in captivity, Shah Jahan could not resist an architectural opinion. And even in that small exchange, you can feel the distance between a father and a son who had become strangers. In the final months of his life, Aurangzeb wrote a series of letters to his sons. They are among the most remarkable documents produced by any ruler in any era. "I have spent my life in ignorance," he wrote. "I do not know who I am or where I am going. I came alone and I leave alone. I do not know what punishment awaits me." In another letter, he wrote that the empire would not survive his death in its current form, and that he knew this, had known it, but could not stop it. These are not the words of a tyrant confident in his righteousness. These are the words of an old man, 88 years old, dying in a tent far from home, trying to make sense of a life he had spent in absolute power and absolute loneliness. Whatever you think of Aurangzeb, those letters make him human. Aurangzeb died in March 1707 in the Deccan at the age of 88. His instructions for burial were characteristically austere. No mausoleum, no marble, no monument. An open grave in a courtyard under the sky. His tomb in Kuldabad, Maharashtra is exactly that. A simple earthen grave, partially open, visited by pilgrims and tourists who often seem slightly confused by its modesty. Consider the contrast. Akbar's tomb is a jewel of Mughal architecture in a formal garden. Shah Jahan rests inside the Taj Mahal. And Aurangzeb, who ruled the largest Mughal empire of all, lies under the open sky in a courtyard that you could walk across in 30 seconds. Whether that represents humility, penance, or simply the man's consistent personal austerity, we cannot know. Perhaps all three. Now that you've heard his full story, the question the history books are still arguing over: who was Aurangzeb? He was the emperor who, in 1675, had Guru Tegh Bahadur executed, and the same emperor who punished his own son when he discovered he had treated a common man unjustly. He was the emperor who reimposed the jizya tax in 1679, and the same emperor whose court employed more Hindu nobles than Akbar's had. He was the emperor who imprisoned his own daughter, and the same emperor who lived on the income from prayer caps he stitched himself, refusing to take a penny of imperial money for his personal use. He was the emperor whose Deccan campaigns drained the treasury and fractured the empire, and the same emperor who commissioned the Fatawa-e-Alamgiri, a legal achievement still referenced 300 years later. He was the emperor who eliminated his brothers and imprisoned his father, and the same emperor who died alone in a tent, writing letters of profound self-doubt. In Pakistan, many consider him one of the greatest Muslim rulers in history. In India, many consider him the man who broke the pluralist vision of the Mughals.
Perhaps the honest answer is that he was both and neither, and that the discomfort of that ambiguity is precisely what makes history worth studying. 300 years later, the name Aurangzeb still starts arguments. Maybe that's his most lasting legacy.
Three emperors. 1 century. Jahangir, Shah Jahan, Aurangzeb. Between these three men, you can see the entire arc of what happens to power when it passes from a visionary to inheritors who each, in their own way, could not quite hold what they had been given. But the story isn't over yet. In episode 3, we follow the empire into its collapse. 12 emperors in 50 years. Nadir Shah's invasion of 1739, which took the Peacock Throne and the Koh-i-Noor Diamond and massacred 30,000 people in a single day. The rise of the British East India Company. And finally, the last Mughal, Bahadur Shah Zafar, a poet who died in a British prison in Rangoon, writing verses about not having 2 yards of ground to be buried in. If this episode was worth your time, please subscribe to Echoes of History and hit the notification bell so you don't miss episode 3. History is always closer than it seems.